Hey everybody. First things first, welcome. And can you please let me know if you can hear me okay and if you can see me okay, right? And while you guys do that, I'll just take a sip of my coffee because I get a feeling that I'm going to be talking a lot in a minute. Okay, guys, so is the audio okay? Can you hear me okay? And can you see me okay? Anybody? Somebody? Hello, hello. There you go. All right. Okay, so sounds good. And yeah, sounds good. Cool. And video's good. Right. Okay, guys. Well, we have a pretty serious topic to talk about today. And that is a topic of setting up a business plan as a freelance artist or as a future freelance artist, right? Now, a lot of things to cover. I'm going to try to keep it as comprehensive as possible, which means that I will not be spending too much time initially on answering questions because I will go off topic and it will take forever. So we're going to do that, right? Okay, now this session will be recorded, so people that are patrons to my channel can watch this video at their convenience whenever they like, right? Okay, so before we begin, one very important thing. Everything I tell you and everything you do based on what I tell you in this session is at your own risk, right? So I'm not liable because a lot of this stuff depends kind of on where you live, what the local rules are, what the local laws are, and so forth, right? But hopefully the tips are generic enough for you to, be useful, okay? Alrighty, let's see. First of all, of course, if you are planning on becoming a freelance artist, then it's pretty good to have an idea and a strategy. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, the fact that you want to be a 3D artist is not really a strategy, right? That's okay. That's an idea, but you have to be a bit more specific than that if you wanted to turn it into your business, okay? So what I mean is, if you want to become a freelance artist, what type of freelance artist do you want to become? And are you going to specialize? Are you going to be a generalist? Are you going to focus specifically on, for example, selling models online? Are you going to work for clients? If you're going to work for clients, what type of clients? Small businesses, big corporations, and so forth and so on, right? So that's the idea behind, having an idea and having a strategy, okay? Now, once you have that, let's say your idea is that you want to work for companies up to, 10 employees within a range of 200 miles within the country that you live. Now, why am I saying it that way? It pays off to be as specific as possible, right? You need to think about this stuff and you need to write it down too. You need to be very specific because you're going to do a lot of research and it has to fit with your idea, right? So let's say, for example, okay, I want to work in my own country only. I want to work in a range of 200 miles. I want to work, clients, let's say up to about 10 employees, right? Now, the whole idea of looking into what you want to do is because it will help you to understand your competition. Now, what I get a lot is that people work global, and when they are working global, they are competing price-wise with people that live in other areas of the globe, and they have way higher prices or way lower prices, and how to deal with that, right? So, the more specific you get as to what you want to do, the less problems you will have with that issue, okay? All right, so market research. So let's say you have that plan, what I just mentioned, own country and so forth. You're going to start to investigate two things. So one is, who is your competition? And two is, who are your potential clients, right? So from a competition point of view, that's kind of tricky. But you can do a lot. I mean, you can look based on where you live. You can look at the region. You can Google for small studios, freelance artists that offer their services. And what you're going to do is you're going to kind of plot them out on a piece of paper. So where are they located? How far away are they? And anything basically you can find out about them is helpful. So, for example, how much do they charge for a project? Or, is this just one person or is it a team? Because as a team, they typically will ask more money because they got more expenses, right? So you plot all of that down to get a good idea of, right, so who's where, who's doing what. That's the competition. Now, the second thing is, of course, the potential client base, right? And if I'm telling you guys anything that you have a hard time understanding because English may not be your primary language, let me know in the comments and I'll re-explain that, right? Okay, so you're going to investigate potential clients. So let's say you decided on becoming a freelance artist specifically towards architectural visualization and interiors, for example, right? Okay. Once you know that, you know who to investigate as a potential client. This can be architects, it can be project developers, it can be basically anybody that needs any type of work like that. Now, with that information, you start to plot on a map, preferably like Google Map or something like that. You kind of plot where everybody's at, okay? How big are they? How small are they? You can send them an email, you can call them, you can ask about, how often did they use external artists, anything that will help you to get the information that you need, right? Okay, now once you have that, so you have your competition, you have your client base based on what you want to do, right? Two things are going on. You need to find out supply and demand. You are supplying a service, you are doing 3D work, right? The demand is based on the companies around you. So like, for example, the architects, right? If they have work for one 3D artist where there are 75 in that area, there's not a lot of demand and there's a lot of supply. That's what you need to understand, okay? All right, before we move further, any questions about this stuff first, right? So any questions about market research, any questions about supply and demand, any questions about this stuff? And if I'm making it way too complicated, guys, just let me know, right? I know this stuff is not for everyone, but if you're serious about, doing something like this, then it's pretty necessary. Okay, any questions on market research? No? Okay. All right. So by investigating this, you get a better sense of whether there's enough work there for you to make a living. That's kind of the idea, right? Okay, so let's assume that there is. You did your homework, you know about the competition, you know about the potential clients, and you have a good feeling that you will be able to do that, right? Okay, the next question is, okay, so local or global? Are you going to compete with artists that are working remote? I mean, if you're working locally in your country, I can still work from a whole other country and still compete with you to a certain degree, right? So you need to think about this. How are you going to present yourself to a potential client in a way that they won't use a remote artist? So you need to point out the benefits of working with somebody local, okay? All right, so then what you do is a SWOT analysis. Has anybody ever heard of this? And this is spelled like this. So anybody know what this is? Or maybe everybody knows what this is or nobody knows what this is. Just to give you an idea. I think there's a little bit of a lag in the live stream, but that's okay. So anyway, a SWOT analysis stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, right? So once you did your research, what you're going to do is you're going to make a quadrant. So basically an axis like this and like that, right? And each letter goes in one box. So S, W, O, and T. Now, when you're at the S, you're going to look and write down about, okay, what is your strength? What are you really good at? Well, let's say you're an amazing architectural visualization artist, right? That's one of your strengths. Let's say you're living very close to big companies that might need your services, and they need it like really fast. When they call, you have to be there in 30 minutes. Well, that could be a very good advantage for you, right? Now, the W weakness could be, let's say you only work in Blender, right? Or let's say your English isn't great and you want to work with English-speaking customers and so forth. You need to get a good understanding of what these things are for you, so you know and you understand your business, right? So the next one is opportunity. So maybe you have and I said this before in other calls, maybe you have a place where they build kitchens, right? Now, if you can create a kitchen in 3D, instead of them having to build it, they can work much faster, save a lot of money, and that's good for you because you got work, right? And then, of course, the T for threat is, let's say you got too much competition going on, or you're specifically working in Maya and they announce that they're going to triple the price or something. Anything that might hurt your business, right? Okay. So when you have all that done, then you start to think about, okay, marketing strategy. Now, marketing strategy basically boils down to, how do I get word out that I'm doing what I'm doing? And how do I get people to hire me as an artist? That's kind of the idea, right? Now, when it comes to a marketing strategy, there are basically two main things you need to think about. And that is what they call a push strategy and a pull strategy. Now, I'll try to explain this. Let's compare a Rolls-Royce automobile to a bag of sugar, right? Now, if you are a Rolls-Royce company, then you have a huge marketing budget. You have literally tons of money to spend on advertisement and on glossy ads and whatever. What you don't have is a whole bunch of Rolls-Royces sitting in stock, because there are not that many people that buy one, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to pull customers towards you. You're going to invest money in advertising. You're going to tell everybody that Rolls-Royce is great and you have to come over to me to buy the Rolls-Royce. Now, the alternative is the bag of sugar. I mean, nobody takes out an ad in a magazine saying, hey, we sell bags of sugar, right? That's not how it works. What they do instead is they spend the money that they would spend on the advertising, and they spend it on putting stock everywhere. Every store, every place you go, you can buy sugar, right? So it's a convenience product. Now, for you as a 3D artist, this applies as well. Let's say you are making low poly game props and you're selling them for $5, right? Now, if you start to do a lot of ads on this, you're spending more money on the ad than you're making with the model, right? So what you would do is you would sell the models, let's say on CG Trader or TurboSquid or whatever, and that would be your bag of sugar, right? You would post your models everywhere and try to get as many income streams as possible. Now, alternatively, you have some very specialist specific models you spend 80 hours on, or 90 hours or 100 hours on, right? And you want to be, that's your Rolls-Royce, right? You want to pull your clients to you. So if you have a website or a portfolio, you would be very explicit about that specific model and show everything, the wireframe, the map baking, the whole 9 yards, and make a lot of publicity about that. So you're pulling clients or potential clients towards you, okay? All right, so any questions on the SWOT analysis and on the marketing stuff? Because next, what I'm going to do is talk about production, and I'll explain that, and most importantly, money, so finances, right? So any questions about the marketing, the online presence, the logo, the house style, the social media platforms, anything you have to do to promote your business? Any questions on that? Let's see, I'll take in one questions while you guys think about this. So what should I do if I not only provide 3D, but also 2D services as a concept designer? How to determine who are the conditional competitors, how to understand the cost of their services. Well, first of all, that's a good question. Second is, because you do 2D and 3D, your competition is not necessarily a competition. Your competition is those people that do 2D and 3D. So because you have additional qualifications, if you're talking to a client that uses both services in general, you have a better position compared to somebody that just does 3D or just does concept work, because you're 2-in-1, right? So that's the way I would look at it. I would look at it from that standpoint. If you have clients that only use concept artists, for example, that is not what I would focus on, because you're supplying something that is out there everywhere. Does that kind of answer your question? Okay, so no questions on the marketing stuff. All right, so now we're going to get into the nitty gritty, right? Okay, so you know what you want to do, you know how you want to do it, and so forth. Now, let's talk about production planning. Now, that kind of sounds like a factory, and it isn't, but the reality is this. If you're working as a freelance 3D artist, part of your time, hey, Steffi, part of your time is spent on finding clients, doing paperwork, paying taxes, I don't know, washing your car, whatever. And the remainder of the time you're working for actual clients, right? What I'm saying here is that if you are working 40 hours a week, you're not working 40 hours a week making money. You're working maybe 15 hours a week making money. The rest of the time you're trying to keep clients coming in, right? And that's not a paid activity. So you need to have a good understanding of, how much potential do you have to actually make money, right? Now, in order for you to understand that, you need to know, okay, so how much money, right? Well, first of all, are you going to work by yourself, or are you going to work with staff, or are you going to collaborate with other artists? Because this can be an impact on your cost, right? The more cost you have, the more money you have to make. Makes sense. Okay, let's see what else. So hardware and software, for example, right? Do you have the required hardware? Do you have the required software? And do you know what the expenses are? Now, talking about expenses, how do you know how much money you need to make as a 3D artist? How do you know how can you prepare for the future? Let me explain that. There's a cost out there in the market for 3D artists. Now, if you get paid that amount that everybody else gets paid, right? Will that cover your cost or not? You don't know, right? So what you need to do is you need to understand all your finances. Now, to begin with, what are your private expenses? So let's say you're living in your mom's basement, right? And you spend, I don't know, $25 a week on hamburgers and video games, and that's about it, right? Then your overhead is very, very low. The money that you have to make to survive is very low. However, if you're living in a house and you got payments for the house and you're married and got 4 kids and whatever, excuse me, whole different ballgame. So you need to know exactly what your private expenses are, because that needs to be covered. That's one, right? Then you know that you also have business expenses. So what are these? Well, I don't know, business cards, paper for your printer, ink for your printer, your cell phone, your car, your hardware, your Maya subscription, and so forth and so on. So you have a whole list of private expenses. You have a whole list of business expenses. Then you have the business expenses that you don't have yet, right? Because, for example, your computer will have to be replaced after 3 years. You cannot just not worry about it, and after 3 years, you have to fork out $5,000-6,000, and you don't have that. So you have to put in reservations, okay? So private expenses, business expenses, reservations for future expenses, you put all of that together, and that will give you a number per month, all right? Okay, let's say, I don't know, $10,000. Okay, cool. And don't forget about taxes, right? Okay, so $10,000. Now, you know that you have to make that $10,000 in that month. Okay, cool. But I just said you don't have billable hours every day. You're working maybe 2.5 days a week, not making any money at all because you're driving to clients to talk to them, hoping they'll hire you and so forth. So let's say you have 2.5 days a week, right? So times 4 weeks, let's say, I don't know, roughly 10 days a month, right? To make the $10,000, right? So you need to make $1,000 a day. That's basically it. Now, once you know this, you have the idea of, okay, what can I move here, right? I can either lower my private expenses, try to lower my business expenses, or try to increase my business income, right? These are the only things you can do. And once you have this calculation kind of going on in your head and on paper, you have a better understanding of how feasible it is that you will actually be able to do this. Okay? Okay, now, what's an example? Let's say fixed expense compared to variable expense. For example, let's say I want to buy a $5,000 graphics card so I can do my own rendering. That's going to cost me $5,000, and it's going to take me a long time to make back that $5,000. But do I really need it? Because maybe I just need it on occasion because I don't render that often, right? So alternatively, instead of spending $5,000 on that card, what I can do is rent rendering services when I need them. So rent a render farm, for example, right? So that will lower the cost of that. And you can do that as well with your private expenses. Do I need a car, or can I take public transportation, and so forth and so on, right? So once again, private expense, business expense, reservation for the future, and potential income. Now, how can you increase the number of hours that you're making money? Well, being very efficient. Try to do all the paperwork and everything else, for example, in 1 day a week, so you can work 4 days a week, right? Or work 5 days a week, or 6 days a week, or 7 days a week. Basically anything you have to do, okay? All right, so let's see, reservations, saving money, of course, because what if you get sick and you can't work at all? Then what, right? Now, it kind of depends on where you live and what the rules are. Now, talking about rules here, let me tell you this. In some countries, there is a legal requirement for you as a 3D artist to register yourself at the Chamber of Commerce. And that's going to cost you money too. So you would be spending money even before you set up shop, because you're paying legal fees and paper fees and, you know, red tape stuff. And you have to consider all of that. Okay. And then, of course, taxes. Don't think because you're just working for yourself, you don't have to pay taxes. And what a lot of people do wrong, and not just a little bit wrong, but so wrong that they kill their business, is they forget about taxes. Now, I don't know what the tax revenue service is called in your country, but if you are in the US, you know, Uncle Sam, the IRS, any money that you make, they want a piece of it, right? And you need to understand up front, if somebody pays you 1,000 euros, you cannot go out and spend that 1,000 euros to buy something, because out of those 1,000 euros, 400 euros you have to set aside to pay your taxes, right? So make sure you're well informed. Okay, and then before I get into the question stuff, because I really enjoy answering your questions and so on, right? One more thing, diversify your income, okay? So let's say you got one big client, right? You're living down the street from Nike, and Nike wants a 3D artist, and they say, here's a bunch of work, and you're making tons of money, and it's all good, right? Suddenly, they decide to not hire you anymore, but somebody else, and you are literally out of business, because you go from 100% income to 0% income, right? So what you need to do is diversify your income. You need to work for local companies, for big companies. You need to do some 3D logo work. You need to work for your next door neighbor. You need to, I don't know, drive a cab or serve food if you have to. Do whatever you do to make sure that, you know, it all ties together, okay? All right, let's see. Yeah, so this is the high level stuff, right? So to be more specific, give me some questions so I can get into that a little bit. Let's see. Black Star is saying, is it worth it to set this up while at university? Absolutely. And I would say that is a very, very, very smart move to do that. Try to set up the structure of the business, not necessarily start spending a bunch of money, but you can think about the process, you can think about the market, you can do your research, you can do your homework without spending 1 cent. But you can even slowly start to find clients, if you will. So a very, very smart move. Okay, so Fiverr and freelance, how to get more work there? Well, Fiverr is kind of debatable. I've seen 3D artists there. I wouldn't say that's the ideal place to go, because Fiverr is typically a place where you will see people working for extreme low amounts of money. And the reality is, if you're working as an independent freelance 3D artist, you're not going to be dealing with gigs that will bring you $10 and $20 and whatever. Basically, like I just said, you might need to make $1,000 a day, right? Now that's maybe on the high side, but you get my idea. You can't go out and work on things that are going to make you $10 because you'd have to work 40 hours a day, right? Let's see. What else? What is the ability to be a freelancer artist in 3D modeling? Well, the thing is, if you're a freelance 3D artist, and you usually are a generalist, meaning that you're offering your services, you kind of need to be all around, right? So you need to be able to do some modeling and texturing, maybe not necessarily rigging and animating, but at the very least, texturing, map baking, to be able to create game props or whatnot. Okay, this is a good question. What's better, set a price list or have it per project? Well, I assume you mean, do you have one price for the project, or do you bill per hour? I think that's your question. The problem is this: once you bill per hour, the client will want you to work faster, right? And if the client wants you to work faster, then probably the quality will go down, and that's not a good thing, right? So if you understand your business correctly, then you would be able to offer them a price based on project, right? And that's what I do. Now, the thing is this, though: what clients typically try to do is what they call creeping, right? And creeping means that you'd agree on this, right? And while you're working on it, the client is doing this, right? And yeah, I got one more question, and can you do one more change, and so forth and so on. And what initially is supposed to be a 3-day job now is suddenly a 2-week job, and you're not getting any more money, right? So if you ask money on a project base, you have to be very clear about, okay, when is the project done? What is considered an additional change, and how much can you charge for that? Okay. Let's see. What about getting work as an amateur? Do we really have to put our portfolio? Well, first of all, I don't know what you mean by amateur. I mean, do you mean that your skills are not a pro level, or do you mean that you have not set up a company? Okay, so Clem's saying, how do you market yourself against in-house renderers, modelers in an architect firm? Okay, well, the thing is this. Whenever you have an architect firm or a team that specializes in ArchViz, right, they have a number of people employed based on what is the absolute minimum of work they get in, right? So if they typically have work for, let's say, 5 people, they'll usually have 3 people employed, because they can't afford the overhead to have people sitting around. So what they will do is they will have a core team of 3, and then they will have a flex pool of, let's say, 5 or up to 10. And the flex pool are freelance 3D artists that they know, that they understand, that they've seen their work, and these people can help them when they have peak season, right? So, for example, in the architectural world, especially in private homes and stuff, most building starts in spring and ends before summer, right? So in that period, there's a lot more work going on. And although they maybe have 3 people employed, they will source freelance artists to help them to do that, right? So what I would do is I would go to these companies and introduce yourself and show your work and say, well, just call them and say, hey, I'm not necessarily looking for you to hire me. I just want to introduce myself, show you my work, and explain to you that I can help you in periods where it's very busy for you, right? And then you build a rapport with them, and that's how you start to build your client base. Let's see. Hermes saying how to build a career as a freelance artist when we are in learning as a student in 3D. Well, first of all, if you are a student right now and you want to become a freelance artist, then learn everything you can, both in university but also outside. Now, the biggest thing that I've seen under freelance artists is they are great at what they do from a creative standpoint, but they typically have a poor business sense. They don't understand planning, they don't understand finances, they don't understand legal stuff, taxes, and so forth. So if you're planning to become a freelance artist, start watching business videos on YouTube, for example, right? Let's see. Okay, so what is better, a generalist or a specialist? Well, interesting discussion, because I literally talked about this in my group yesterday, where some people said, well, a generalist is a specialist too. The thing is, if you're working freelance, you typically are working solo. And as a solo artist, if you get a client and they're asking you to do something, you have to do all of it, right? Or collaborate with other artists. So it pays off to be a generalist. Now, if you are a generalist, but you have one specialism, that's always good. If you only have one specialism and can't do anything else, I wouldn't work as a freelance artist, to be honest. Are there any disadvantages of freelancing? Oh, there are tons and tons and tons of disadvantages. I mean, you never know whether you're going to make money next month, right? What if you get sick and you can't make any money? What if you can't pay for your insurance? What if some application comes along that makes everything so much easier that they don't need you anymore, and so forth and so on, right? And still, people do this. Why do they do that? Because a lot of artists, especially from a creative standpoint, want to do their own thing. If you are the type of person that has a hard time working for a boss or for an employer, then you really don't have a lot of choice. I have worked for myself a long time, and I really would have a very hard time working for a boss, I guess. So are there disadvantages? Of course, but there are disadvantages for working for a company too. I mean, there are deadlines, you have to work overtime, you don't get paid for the overtime, and so forth and so on. Let's see. Okay, so how can we get FX freelance work? Well, again, I mean, it's all about the homework, right? If that's the work you're looking for, a lot of people aim for the big studios, but the reality is this: working as an FX artist for a big studio is probably the most unlikely place to find a job. It's possible, people get hired, you can do it, but it's very, very, very hard. And if you want to work freelance, then I guess it's investigating what type of clients use your work, right? And I'm thinking TV commercials, stuff like that, right? So let's say you have ad agencies that produce TV commercials for clients, right? Like the dancing bag of potato chips and whatnot. If they need effects for that, if they need smoke, if they need fire, explosions, and so on, that's where I would look. Okay. Let's see. Does freelance working, would that lead to working in a big company? I wouldn't say in a big company. I would say for a big company, because there's a big difference. If you're planning to become a freelance 3D artist in order to be hired as an employee by a big company, I wouldn't do it. I mean, the time and effort it takes to build a freelance artist business, if you will, is pretty extreme, right? Why would you do that? and then later on chuck it all out the window to work for a big studio? Why not just focus on getting a job at a big studio? That's what I would say. If you're talking about working as a freelance artist with a big studio, that all depends on the type of work you choose and how good you are. Okay, what else, guys? Okay, so I'm seeing a bunch of questions that are not really related to the topic, which is basically the business side of things. So I'm not going to get into those as much. Let's see. So any questions about money, about how much to ask? Oh, thanks, Aman. Money, cost, billing, contracts, taxes, legal stuff, insurances. Any questions on that stuff? How much can a freelancer earn? A lot. You can earn a lot, you can earn a little. Again, it depends on where you live, right? I mean, one country is not the other. Some countries, the cost of living is extreme, but then again, you also make more money, right? I've seen freelance artists, solo freelance artists, so not companies, solo people, right? Making 150,000, 200,000, $250,000, but that's kind of extreme, right? Then we're talking about super skilled, super specialists working for huge companies. I think if you're working in North America or Western Europe, it's more in line with, I would say, after taxes, about maybe, I don't know, 55,000 a year or so. I think that's more realistic. But then again, when you're a freelance artist, keep in mind that a lot of things you have as a solo business owner are basically private expenses that are being paid by the company, right? And as a result, you don't need that much. I mean, for example, if my phone is paid by my company and my car is paid by my company, these are private expenses I don't have to make anymore, right? So at the end of the day, you might not make that much money a year, but at the same time, your expenses are way lower. So okay, good question. How to approach companies to give freelance work through a contract basis? Okay, well, let's split that up into two questions. How do you approach companies and how do you get a contract, right? First of all, if you approach a company and say, hey, I'm Jim and I want to work for you, they get this question all the time, right? And they don't necessarily want to, I mean, if they were looking for an artist, they would say so, right? Now, the big problem here always is when 3D artists approach companies, they tend to talk about themselves, right? And they'll say, hey, I'm Mike, I'm a 3D artist, I can do this for you and that for you, and so on and so forth. Now, keep in mind that your client or your potential client, they have a lot of stuff going on in their mind. They're not concerned about you, they're not thinking about you, and they're not worried about you, right? So in order for you to get their attention, you need to tell them things they want to hear, not the things you want to tell, right? So what they want you to do is tell them how you can make their life easier, how you can make their expenses lower, how you can make their profits higher, and so forth. Now, how do you do that? Well, for example, and I gave this example, I think, in a previous live stream as well. Let's say you have a small furniture company in your village, right, or town, and they got 10 people working there and they're making all sorts of products. Now, back in the day, what they would do is they would make a product, they would put it online or in the store and try to sell it, which is expensive because if you don't sell it, you're stuck with it. You already made the expense, right? So you can go in there and say, well, listen, I'm here just to talk to you, nothing else, because I want to get a better understanding of, the companies in my area because I'm doing research for my own business. And they might say, oh yeah, what are you doing? Well, I'm trying to see if there are ways to lower expenses for businesses in the area by adding my expertise. All right, so what do you do? Well, I'm a 3D artist, and by creating the table that you're creating right now in 3D, You don't have to spend time and money and resources and materials on it, and you can still put it online as a photorealistic table, right? And once you sell it, you actually start to make it. So instead of paying 10 people to build that table, you're going to pay me to model it in 3D, and you're going to save a bunch of money. That's kind of the idea, right? Does that make sense? So I get a question here. Will the broadcast be saved? The broadcast will be saved, but it will be available for my patrons only. I mean, that's one of the perks that they get because they support me financially. So people that are patrons, and this is just like $5 a month, they get access to all my live streams. They're all recorded, okay? Let's see. So a question here. My question is how to set how much money to charge for your work, for example, to model and render realistic living room. Okay. All right. So how do you know how much money to charge? Well, this is going to be a bit complicated, but hopefully you guys can follow along, right? Okay, so you're an independent company. So you have your private expenses, you have your business expenses, you have your reservations for future expenses. So you got this number, let's say 10,000 a month, right? You know how much hours per month you can actually work for clients, because part of that is other stuff that's not making money, right? So let's say 10,000 and you have, I don't know, what, 500 hours or whatever you can work, right? So you know the amount per hour you have to make. Let's say $80. Okay. But the problem is everybody out there is selling their services not for $80, but for $60. So you can ask $80 all day long. Nobody's going to hire you, right? So that's useless. So how do you compete with that? Well, what you do is you try to bring that 80 down, not by taking less money, but by looking at how you can lower your expenses by working more efficiently, by maybe working together with somebody else, and so forth and so on. And sometimes they are asking less money because their work is not as good as yours. So don't always try to have the lowest price. You need to do your research so you understand what your work is actually worth. Now, if you're sitting with a client and they're saying, listen, you are too expensive, then your reply should be, why? Tell me why. Explain to me why, right? And they'll say, well, the other person, asked 60 and you ask 80. Okay, well, how long has the other person been in business? How good are they? How fast are they? How good are they in, getting back on whatever they promise you and so forth? And you show your resume and your track record and what you've done and so forth. And you say, and that's why I ask 80 and not 60. And it's fair. You can do that. Okay, so basically the question that I'm seeing here is kind of in line with what I just said. So fixed cost, hourly, milestone based. I personally never work on an hourly basis unless it's something that will take 1 hour. I work on a project base. I will ask a certain amount for a project, but I'll be very, very strict about what is considered out of contract. So if they ask me to do something, okay, this is the time period, this is the contract, this is the amount. Done, right? If you want changes, you will get 2 changes for free. The 3rd change will cost you so much. The 4th change will cost you so much. And if you go over the deadline of the contract, you will pay an X amount per day or per week or per whatever, right? Okay, how about charging for charges in a project? Well, that's a very smart question, and that's actually a really good question. And I'll give you an example of that. Let's say I'm working remote for a client in England, and I'm sitting in Holland, right? And halfway through the project, the client says, well, we need you to look at some changes. So please fly over to London and have a look. So suddenly I'm booking a flight, I'm buying renting a rental car, I'm paying for a hotel, I'm paying for food. Who's going to pay for that, right? Well, they are. What I put in my contract, and make sure you got a contract, is listen, based on what I know, I'll give you a fixed price. Okay, this is the price for the project. If you have incidentals, right, and you want me to do stuff like this, then it's going to be on a cost basis. So if they say, hey, come over to London, I'll say, sure, I'll do that, right? But these are the expenses. Are you willing to carry them? If not, let's just do a phone call. Okay, let's see. To be safe, feeling so how to get customer attention. Okay, any more questions, guys? Self-taught and still learning. Do you think I have a good portfolio? Do I think if you have a good portfolio? I have no idea because I don't know your portfolio. I mean, can you find a job as a freelancer? Let me just address that for a second, right? I get this question all the time. Am I good enough? Will I be able to? Thanks, Susan. Am I good enough? Will I be able to sell my stuff and so forth? Now, let me ask you this: what's the difference between an amateur 3D artist and a professional 3D artist? The word professional means literally that you get paid, right? So if your work is crap, right, and I pay you for it, you are a professional 3D artist making crap work, right? So the difference between the two is whether you are paid or not. Now, most people think otherwise. They think, well, no, it's about the quality level and so forth. Now, where am I going at here? If you have to wait until you are the best 3D artist on the planet before you start working professional, you're never going to do it, right? At some point, you just have to start with where you're at. You're not going to make as much money. You're not going to have as much clients, but you're building a reputation. You're building a client base. And over time, you get better and better and better, right? So is your work good enough? If somebody is willing to pay you for it, yes. Interesting. Is it necessary to work regular hours, like 9 hours daily, or do assigned work with deadlines time, not daily hours? Well, if you're a freelance 3D artist, or if you are any business owner for that matter, you basically work all the time and not all the time. I'll explain that. I basically work 7 days a week, but I work when I want to work, right? Or when I have to work. So if I'm in a different time zone and I'm in Europe, right? I work a lot with the US, which means that they kind of wake up at 2:30 in the afternoon, right? So up until 2:30 in the afternoon, there's nobody awake in the US. So I can still work, but I can't communicate with them. So what I will typically do is in the mornings, I will do whatever I want. And then starting at 2:30 in the afternoon, I start communicating with clients. And then I go on until midnight or 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning. So you kind of need to do what you need to do, right? And I mean, 9 hours a day, the flexibility of being your own business owner, especially once you have kind of a track record and you know that you're going to have income and you're not worried about that too much. I mean, if I want to go to the beach on a Monday while everybody else is working, I can typically do that, right? I mean, the weather here is crap, but other than that, I could do that. If I want to go and walk my dog at 2 in the afternoon, right? Or if I want to work at 4 in the morning, I can basically do whatever I want because I'm a business owner, right? Now, the downside to that is that you have to be able to live with the uncertainty of, will I be making money next month, right? And if you can't deal with that, then you shouldn't be a freelance artist. Okay, any more questions, guys? Let's see. Okay, so how did I build my client base in the US? Well, the thing is, although I live in Holland, Europe, I grew up in Canada initially, and I have been working for American companies for a long, long time. It's even to a point where I actually, in Holland, basically have no clients. I mean, all my clients, or almost all my clients, are in the US, right? Hey, Anna. So, yeah, how do you get them? Well, what I typically say is when you want to build a client base, people need to know that you exist. They need to know what you do, and they need to know how good you are. Now, how do you do that? Not by sending the whole world your resume and your portfolio, because people will get annoyed fast, right? So what you do instead is you kind of integrate yourself into online forums. So you got groups on LinkedIn, you got groups on Facebook, and you have people that are posting their work and so forth. If you become a member of these groups and you start providing feedback to people in a very professional way, right? So don't fool around, don't goof off and all that. Be professional about it, right? Build a personal reputation. If you promise something, do it, right? Over time, people understand who you are. You share your work, you comment on other people's work. And what people will say when they have an opportunity is, hey, I know somebody who can do this. And they will contact you and say, are you available? And that's how you start to build that business. And then once you have done one job for that company or that person, you'll make yourself available for a second job, or they will know somebody who's in a different company, and so forth and so on. That's how that works, right? Okay, what do I do when a client doesn't pay? Well, the thing is, and this is kind of something that I've been doing a long time, depending on the size of the project. I mean, I'm not talking about a $100 project. I'm talking about, let's say, a $5,000 project, right? What I do is, first of all, I make sure I got a contract. Second is that I make sure it's 100% clear what's expected from both sides. And what I will do is I will ask the client to pay 50% upfront, right? So they pay 50% upfront, they pay 25% on delivery, and they pay 25% within 30 days after delivery, just in case there's an issue and so forth. Now, what I will typically do is make sure that the 50% upfront that they pay covers 100% of my cost, right? So the profit bit is in the second and third term. So if they pay me 50% upfront, even if they don't pay anything after that, they didn't burn me, right? And it's up to you, of course, to make sure that you do what you promised to do. But that way, it's very unlikely that they will stiff you. Because if this is a client trying to rip you off, they're not going to pay you the 50% upfront anyway, right? And if people are not willing to do that, you should consider whether this is the right person to work for. And the whole thing about, coming to work for me for free and, you'll get the exposure and I'll make you famous and blah, blah, blah. You can't buy bread with famous, right? You can't. It doesn't work like that. Now, there's one exception that I have to mention, though, and that's this. There are occasions where you are asked to work for free in the sense that there's no money involved, but it's still possible that there's a value in there for you, right? So if you get asked to work for something and you're not getting paid in money, but they're giving you something that is valuable to you, being the experience, or you get your credits listed on a movie or on a game or whatnot, it's your decision to do that. Let's see, sometimes clients ask for samples for their project. Should I charge to make a sample to show them? Well, that kind of depends on what you mean by sample. So, I mean, what do you mean? I mean, they're asking you to, I don't know, show your previous work, or are they asking you to make something for them? Because, I mean, if they're asking, if this is about, to understand whether you're skilled enough to do the job, right? First of all, they got your portfolio to look at, which is one thing. And what I would do second is I would say, well, listen, if you want me to provide a sample, that's fine, okay? I'll create the sample, I'll send you an invoice, and you're gonna pay me for that sample, right? However, if based on the sample, you decide to hire me and give me the entire project, I will credit you that sample. So that you will deduct that amount from the total amount. Oh, we're getting into some cool questions here. Tips for T's and C's, or terms and conditions, while getting work. Should we charge the local taxes from our end in invoice? Well, that depends. And this is getting kind of into the field of serious stuff, right? And I need to be careful because tax laws are different per country. But usually when you are, and I assume you're talking about sales taxes, right? Sales taxes differ from state to state in the US, from country to country in Europe, and so forth. So the percentage is different. But Normally, when you charge something to a company and you have a registered company, you have to ask taxes, right? There's an exception though. If you bill something to someone that is living in another country, right, it will be typically 0%, right? But it's going to be 0% both ways. So if I buy something, let's say I buy something in the US while I'm living in Holland, right, the tax percentage will be 0 because it's export, right? This is going way beyond the topic of what we're talking about, but I have a kind of a tax background, so that's what that's about. But in general, if you're working for a client in the country where you live, sure, you have to put in the taxes, right? And not only in the amount, you have to separate the taxes. So you have to say, this is the amount, this is the tax amount, and this is the amount with these two together. You cannot put it in one number. It has to be specified, right? And also, just to get back on the terms and conditions thing, when you offer your services to a client, right, and it's supply and demand, so you need to understand very clearly when something is considered done, right? Because you have the obligation to deliver, they have the obligation to pay. Now, when is your obligation to deliver fulfilled? When do you both agree, okay, so now I'm done, right? You need to be very specific about that, okay? And then vice versa, you need to be very specific when they're going to pay you, in what currency, in what time frame, and so forth and so on. And what happens if they don't pay you? Because I see a question here about contracts, right? A contract basically says, this is what I expect from you, and that's what you expect from me. What people always tend to forget is what happens if you don't, right? So I'll say you need to pay within 30 days in a contract, okay? Now, let's say you don't, right? There's nothing in the contract saying what's going to happen if you don't, right? That's kind of a flaw. So you need to specify in your contract, you pay within 30 days. If you don't pay within 30 days, you get an additional interest on top of that initial amount of 2% a week or whatever. And if you don't, pay within 3 months, I'm going to take you to court and sue your ass and that kind of stuff, right? All right, so let's see. Do I have a basic contract that I can use and edit it to our needs when we'll send a contract to a new client? That's kind of hard because there are literally probably a million different types of contracts, right? The good thing is, though, that if you get into a situation like that, one of the primary things, and I talked about diversification of income, one of the things that I do is I work as a mentor or a tutor or a advisor or consultant, whatever you want to call it, to 3D artists. So if you're in a situation where you need a contract, you can hire me to help you with that, right? And I charge reasonable rates, and you can basically hire me for 1 hour periods, and we'll talk about anything you want, 3D related, contracts, business stuff, and so on. And then you can go out and do your thing. Okay, weekly work schedule. How many days a week is it worth working? Well, first of all, you need to work whatever you need to work, right? If you need to do it, you need to do it. Whatever you have planned, whatever you have going on, if you need to make ends meet. You need to make sure that next week you still have a house to live in, you still have food to eat, and so forth. Now, when that's taken care of, one tip I would give you, though, is it's very common for people that start as freelance artists to work 24/7, basically, right? They're so busy with everything, and they burn out fast because they don't take time to relax. They don't take time to have fun and whatnot. So you need to manage your downtime. You need to force yourself to take a break, force yourself to do something fun, because otherwise you're not going to hold out. Okay, let's see. What's a good price range to start with? I have someone who wants to hire me for interior design and not sure what to charge. Okay, so are we talking interior design or interior 3D modeling? And is it, modeling, texturing, lighting, and so forth? Is it still renders or not? I mean, it kind of depends on what they're going to use it for, right? If it's going to be in a magazine or in their website or whatnot, and yeah. Okay, so interior 3D modeling, and is it going to be? I mean, what's it for? Is it for like a visualization for clients and so forth? I mean, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say, but I mean, I'm not going to say a number. I can't tell. I mean, this can be a 10-minute job. It can be a 500-hour job. I don't know, right? But in average, visualizations like that, I would say, okay, an extension to a house, anything from a couple of hundred to a couple of thousand. I would say if it's nothing fancy, probably maybe around 600, 700, 800, something like that. Right, what else? Okay, guys, well, we're hitting 1 full hour right now. I want to do an additional 10 minutes, and I'm going to call it quits, okay? So 10 minutes more, guys. So give me your best shot. Give me some very hard questions. Okay, so Jana has an interesting question. If a company is a startup that wants to hire you and pay with shares, is there any general line how to answer? Well, the thing is this. If a company is a startup, right, you don't really know what the value of the company is, and you don't know if they are having any life expectancy at all, right? It's very, very tricky to do it that way. I mean, if that is the alternative to no pay at all, I would consider it, but it's very, very risky. If you need the money, don't do it, right? I mean, they can do so many things to value the company in a different way that's going to hurt you. And I personally wouldn't do it. Okay, so when a company asks me to track my work hours daily and send a report how to do the negotiation, well, that would be very simple. I would just say, no, I'm not going to do that. I mean, it's like, let's say you need surgery, right? And you have a doctor working on you, and you say to the doctor, well, okay, you're going to operate on my kidneys or whatever, but I wanted you to write down the exact number of minutes you're working on me, right? I think that wouldn't be too good for your health. I'm not sure. So they are buying a product from you. If you gave them a fixed price, they're buying a product, right? They're buying the kitchen you're going to model or the interior you're going to model, and you gave them a price. If you're working on an hourly basis, of course you're going to give them the hours because you're going to send them an invoice for the hours. But if you gave them a number and they want to track your activity, I mean, you're a business owner, you're not a little kid, right? And if they don't trust you as a professional to do what you agreed on doing, then you're working for the wrong people. Okay. Let's see. I didn't see any questions about insurance or, well, I saw one question about taxes, but nothing about insurance, nothing about liability, nothing about logo stuff, house style, that kind of stuff. Any questions on that? Okay, so Sava is saying, for the person who worked for years in the creative industry as a photo editor and wants to transfer to the 3D game industry, how to know when it's a good time to start applying for 3D jobs? Well, let's see, there's one follow-up. I meant how to know when my work is good enough. Well, again, if you want to integrate yourself into that 3D world, become a member of 3D forums, post your work, ask for feedback, ask for comments, compare your work with others, and so forth and so on. I mean, that's basically the only way to get a good understanding of what is good and what is not. And I mean, good is subjective to begin with. I mean, you like something or you don't. But if you have the right people, they will give you constructive feedback, not just I like it or I don't like it, but I like it because, or I don't like it because. Okay? Before I forget, guys, let me just post a link to my Hangout group, just in case you guys are not a member just yet. Because I think you will like that. So this is a group. It's my personal Hangout group for my channel. And there are more than 3,000 3D artists in there. They post stuff, they collaborate, they work together, and so forth. And if you're not a member just yet, I definitely would like to invite you to become a member, because people have a lot of fun. Group has been online for, I think, 4 years now already. And yeah, it's cool. So check that out, right? Okay, guys. Well, a little over 4 minutes left. Any other questions? Any questions? Nothing? No? Nope. Doesn't seem like it. Okay, one more question. Yeah, any more? Do I have any more groups that are not on Facebook? Well, the thing is, a lot of people in my group don't have a Facebook account. And basically, they made an empty Facebook account just to become a member of that group. Now, the group is a closed group. So basically, that means that, whatever happens in the group stays in the group. And a lot of people don't do any public posting or anything like that outside of that group. And you can be as active or as inactive as you like in that group. Some people have been there for, yeah, Jana, now that's a sound when my emails come in. People can be in that group and post nothing at all. Other people post a lot. So you can be as active as you like, okay? Let's see. Thanks, Ryan. Oh, thank you, Steffi. Let's see. What else? Okay, guys, let's do one more question. One more. Who's up? I'm not going to do the are there birds in there or what, because I just covered that. Okay. All right. One more question, guys. Just one. Who's up? Okay, let's see. Here we go. Some companies, specifically NGOs, ask for previous budget receipts or previous work with other companies. Have you ever had to deal with that? Well, if companies ask for that, that is extremely, extremely, extremely unprofessional. I mean, if you are working with them, they wouldn't want you to share information with other clients as well, right? So when clients ask me to share information about, budgets and so forth, what I did with previous clients, that's none of their business, right? I mean, that is between the client and me. We had a contract, we fulfilled that contract, and I'm not going to tell them. And it's crazy for somebody to ask that question, really. I mean, you can't do that, right? Okay, why not? 1.5 minutes more, guys. Let's see. And then it's 1 hour and 10 minutes. Perfect round number. I'm a little bit OCD, so let's do that. Working through Fiverr. Okay, so I got the Fiverr question before. For 3D work, maybe not so much. Best platform to share 3D content. Well, there are a whole bunch of them. There's TurboSquid, there's CG Trader, there's Render Hub. I would kind of spread it out, I would say. Let's see. First, Mirza, thank you. Where am I from? Okay, I'm from Canada originally, and right now I'm living in Holland. Okay, by the way, hang on. I see people talking about coding, right? Okay, so let me just type in my email address here. So if you are good at coding in Unreal, then send me an email, okay? Might have something interesting. Okay, guys, I guess that's a wrap. So you are all so amazing for hanging out here for such a long time and listening to me yapping about. If you have any questions about the session, you can send me an email. I just posted my email address there. Definitely want to ask you guys to check out the Hangout group. Always a lot of fun. Thank you so much for hanging out. And hopefully you guys will be there when I do this again, right? So that's for me. Thank you guys so much. And see you guys next time. Bye. Bye, guys.